Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. As expected, my initial announcement that the comments section on YouTube will now be moderated has been met with a mix between relief for some, outrage for some others, and name-calling for more than a couple. But I've also seen a lot of good questions raised and a few concerns that people have in regards to this, and so I wanted to put out a video to let you all know what's been happening on the back end and to discuss the whole situation so we can have some clarity. Now, firstly, I want to address the outcry of people shouting censorship and freedom of speech when it comes to the idea of moderation taking place on my channel. And I've noticed that, as with anything, it seems there are a number of people out there that continue to twist the definition of a thing to suit their own ends in spite of the truth. I have even been doing so myself unknowingly when it comes to the idea of freedom of speech. So first, let's go over the core tenets behind freedom of speech and, more importantly, freedom of expression, which is at the core of this whole situation. Now, first, we have freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech is defined as the right of people to express their opinions publicly without governmental interference, subject to the laws against libel, incitement to violence, or rebellion, etc. Now, what this is intended to serve as is a buffer to ensure that the government does not silence open discourse in order to prevent an oppressive society. The more commonly accepted term that everyone goes by is actually freedom of expression, which is very commonly confused with freedom of speech. Now, freedom of expression is defined as everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art, or through any other media of his choice. Now, that is where most trolls and other bad eggs tend to simply stop and draw the line. However, there's actually more there. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights further expresses the caveats that the exercise of these rights carries special duties and responsibilities and may therefore be subject to certain restrictions when necessary for respect to the rights or reputations of others or for the protection of national security or of public order or of public health or morals. Therefore, freedom of speech and expression may not be recognized as being absolute, and common limitations to freedom of speech relate to libel, slander, obscenity, pornography, sedition, incitement, fighting words, we'll get to that in a moment, classified information, copyright violation, trade secrets, non-disclosure agreements, the right to privacy, the right to be forgotten, public security, and perjury. And in relation to fighting words, I'll use a statement used by a U.S. Supreme Court judge. There are certain well-defined and narrowly limited classes of speech, the prevention and punishment of which have never been thought to raise any constitutional problem. These include the lewd and obscene, the profane, the libelous, and the insulting or fighting words, those which by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. It has been well observed that such utterances are no essential part of any exposition of ideas and are of such slight social value as to step to truth that any benefit that may be derived from them is clearly outweighed by the social interest in order and morality. So basically what fighting words are is when you directly insult someone or you deliberately make a comment just to get a rise out of them. So it's with that knowledge in hand that I did decide to begin moderating the comments section of my videos. You see, freedom of speech and freedom of expression comes with them that idea of the social contract, that there are consequences and stipulations for those precepts that all civilized people abide by. There are those, however, that rely on the anonymity that the internet affords in order to ignore that social contract and do whatever they want. What they are doing is not free speech, and it is most certainly not freedom of expression. There are social caveats to what we say and do that are required for a peaceful and prosperous society. These precepts are deemed as universal by most countries in the world, and while some of those countries may have lesser or greater restrictions on those precepts, the core principles are still there in both freedom and in restriction. Now, this is something that people do not wish to see brought onto my comments section at all. I would say they don't want them brought onto the internet in period, except that moderation is common practice on most sites. Steam, Twitch, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, all of them abide by that social contract to lesser or greater degrees. And it is a fact that, for a time, I had considered any form of moderation on my channel to be censorship when that is not actually the case. I stated that I have a responsibility here, and I do believe that. I do not maintain that I have a responsibility for those posting garbage on my channel, but it has been made clear the dumpster fire that is my comments has harmed my channel's reputation, it has cost my channel some opportunities, and I have made the decision to get my house in order, which means treating my comments section under that same social obligation as I would expect myself and others to purport themselves while in the grocery store, a crowded theater, a restaurant, a place of business, or a friend's house. And what these people are doing is the equivalent of walking up to a stranger in my place of business and shouting at them and calling them names. This would not be tolerated out in the world, and it will no longer be tolerated here. This is my place of business, and I do have a duty to my viewers and to my channel to see that it is conducted with integrity. Before we talk a bit more about some other concerns that need to be addressed, let's talk a bit about what is actually happening here. Now, I recognize that I would not be able to adequately moderate my own comments as they're already too large to handle alone as it is, and there's just not enough hours in the day. So I've employed a team of volunteer moderators that will be doing most of the legwork. In order to ensure that objectivity can be maintained now that they are in place, I will not personally be removing comments directly. I will be leaving that to the moderators. However, just so everyone knows what that process looks like, be aware that YouTube's system in this regard are woefully inadequate and far below what could be considered industry standard. The moderator removed comments do go into a bucket for my review. Once there, I have final say on whether to simply remove the comment, restore it, or mute the user. And if we end up coming across too many comments that have to be restored, I will have a discussion with the moderators and get them back on track. It's worth noting, though, that once gone, YouTube does not have any infrastructure to be able to recall removed comments. So if they're gone for good. And just so you all are aware, there are a set of criteria that the moderators already have been and will be abiding by. Those criteria are as follows. 1. Spam or bot accounts. This will include a person copy-pasting the same comment or slight variations of it on multiple content threads and or videos. 2. Abusive content and personal attacks towards a person or group of people. 3. Racist content or intent. 4. Pornographic content. That one should be pretty easy to figure out. 5. Content intended only for shock value. This would include what we discussed there in terms of fighting words. 6. Derogatory terms designed to serve no other purpose than to verbally attack another person. And then 7. Doxing or revealing personal information. Now, if anyone feels that they have been muted or had a comment removed in error, they will be free to send an email to moderation@sidalpha.com. This is an email address that is shared by the moderators for this express reason, as well as to answer any questions in regard to moderation of the channel in general. Please do not dispute these actions in the comments section. That's what the email is for. I will also post these guidelines and the moderation email address in the About Me section of the channel, as well as in the description below. Now, most notably, and one thing that I know a great deal of people have been concerned about, is the idea of differing opinions. Those will be more than welcome, assuming they do not violate the criteria that I previously listed. What this means is that I do fully intend to uphold freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but I will no longer accept the anarchistic interpretations of those precepts by the trolls and bad eggs that have attempted to alter the definition of those freedoms for their own ends. Those people that have twisted the precepts of freedom of expression and turned it into a weapon to beat anyone over the head that would dare speak up against their abhorrent behavior. Also, I've seen some grumbling over some higher voted comments on the original announcement disappearing. A couple of those were removed due to name-calling and being directly antagonistic. Again, we're back to those fighting words. Others disappeared due to those users later directly insulting either myself or other viewers of my channel, and because of that, they've been muted. This, of course, removed the original post on those threads, causing them to disappear. I know that there are going to be a few people that will roll their eyes and refuse to believe what it is that I'm saying, but I would ask you in response, why would I lie? Now, what purpose would it serve except to potentially destroy the reputation of my channel? If I were to lie about this, the trolls and those that now hate me for the audacity that I've shown here would use that to destroy the credibility that my channel relies on. Quite frankly, I'm just not that stupid. And it's actually disappointing that some people believe that I am, which also makes me wonder that if they really felt that way about me and my channel to begin with, why did they even come here? Others have also accused me of doing the same thing as those dirty devs and asset flippers that I have called out in the past, and while it pains me to have to point out a false equivalency as large as that one, I do feel it needs said. There is a world of difference between a person who is attempting to sell a substandard product to consumers for money and a YouTube channel. When a dirty dev deletes comments and issues false DMCA claims, they are doing so in order to hide from criticism, in order to be able to more easily dupe even more customers into purchasing their substandard product. Moderation of my channel is not to create an echo chamber. It is not to hide from criticism, and it is not to be able to dupe more people into purchasing something. I'm quite literally not selling you anything at all. That is a more stark example of apples and oranges than I've ever come across, and it's really disappointing that there are some people that might actually believe that. But then again, I do my best to educate and inform, so I will continue to do that to the best of my ability. Again, this is not to censor anyone. No one is preventing you from expressing your opinion, but societal standards will apply when it comes to my channel. And by and large, the vast majority of comments and commenters will never even notice it happening. Even most of the dissenters will ultimately notice very little in this regard. But I understand that this will shake people's faith in me to a certain extent, and my channel as well, and I will do what I can to continue on as I have in the past, which is what earned the trust of so many to begin with. And I think that's about everything that I have to cover there. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.